or, um, you know, support, and admin guys. And that's when I mean, I had already known it was like, this isn't going well. But then once you sort of get pulled away from the teams in general and thrown in a supply, you're like, okay, this is where they send the shitbirds. So from there, I went to talk to the Group 1 Master Chief. I want to know what was going on, which was Steve Ward at the time. He refused to talk to me, but I went over there on my own, and sort of forced a meeting with him. It was like, hey, he said the same line to me. I'm not going to talk to you anything. Don't bring up anything to me. And all I told him was like, the stuff that's being said isn't true. That I suggest they did some internal investigation of their own before they further this. And I told him this will be the biggest black eye in the community if he keeps progressing this way.
Are these guys, did you have personal relationships with all these guys, or?
I knew, you talking about the Master Chiefs?
Yeah.
I knew them, yeah. Like I hadn't done platoons with them or anything, but small community, like, them. They knew who I was too. There was nothing personal, like where they would have something against me or I had something against them. Like, not that I know of anyways. But it was definitely weird the way that everybody sort of, hands off, like you're on your own. I got told by another Master Chief that I was pretty much, I had to look at it as I was on an island all by myself, and I had to swim my way back if I wanted to come back, and no one was going to help me. And that's, after I heard that was like the honest truth. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I'll swim my way back then.
Damn.
Yeah. So it was pretty disheartening.
You knew it was NCIS at this point?
Oh, I dealt with NCIS in the past. I mean, and this is what's funny is like I was brought up in the teams. Obviously, it was like day one shit. Like, don't trust NCIS. They're always out to bag a SEAL. They're always trying to find something to take a SEAL down. And they actually, my first platoon, when I was a new guy, they took my platoon chief off of deployment. Just came up, swooped him halfway through, and he was gone. For some, I don't even know, some BS that didn't even happen. But I had dealt with them like very minimally, just like in that case. And then nothing like this though. And so when I knew they were involved, I didn't know, I had no no idea just how fucked up those guys were.
Yeah.
Like what a clown show they were, and I pretty much, got firsthand experience just seeing how they operated. And when they, well, I'll get to the point where they raided my house, but yeah, they pretty much, they started the investigation, I think in late April of 2018. And I had no idea just how extensive they were investigating. Like, all I was told was an investigation. No one had ever come and talked to me.
This is like a year after the actual...
Yeah.
After the
deployment.
The kid.
Yeah, the kid.
That was May of 2017, correct?
Mm-hmm. So this is about a year later. I obviously was told I was under investigation, but no one was saying a word to me. And I was sitting in supply for however long, a month and a half. No job. I'd show up and there was nothing for me to do. So I took it upon myself at that point. I was like, okay, well, I'll just start prepping for retirement, or like maybe I'll get out. I don't know. So I started taking classes on transition. I went to the Honor Foundation, which is like a transition type program to just see what's like out there in the civilian world and prep you. I started putting in for Intrepid Spear, which is like a branch off of NICO for TBI and everything else like that. I had been recommended to go after that deployment. I'd been, taking enough blasts at that point that they were like, hey, just get checked out. And that's pretty much protocol now. Like before you retire, it's like I want to go get checked out and not, get like a full head to body scan or head to toe scan because, as we know during our career, I don't report anything. I didn't, you suck everything up, and my medical record was pretty thin. So I started all that process while I was in supply, and it was still nobody was blocking me from doing that, but nobody was saying it to me either. And around in June, I get a phone call at home from somebody at supply, one of the chiefs that worked there, and he had told me that the XO wanted to speak to me the following morning. XO was a SEAL, and that I hadn't met with him yet, and he just wanted to have a face-to-face with me since I was attached there, which made sense to me. I was like, okay, whatever. Got up the next morning, went there, showed up, at his office 15 minutes prior in uniform, and knocked on his door, and he cracked it open, looked at me, told me to wait a second, shut the door, and then about a minute later he opened it, and there was probably 5 to 6 NCIS agents in there. I walked in, and they were, flashed their badge, told me that they were going to take me for some interrogation, question me, and they started, pulling everything out of my pockets. At the time, I didn't, I played it cool. I was just like, I was pretty pissed, but I knew if I had reacted in any negative way, it wasn't going to look good. So I was like, okay, just like compliant. But what pissed me off is they handcuffed me for nothing. I was like, why do I need to be handcuffed? I'm going. They're like, oh, it's protocol. It's not protocol. They handcuffed me and paraded me around in front of the whole supply command.
Damn.
For a shame factor, because once somebody sees you in handcuffs, they're like, oh, this guy did something.
Had you done any research on what you should be doing to prepare for what might happen with the investigation?
Yeah. All I knew was, what I had been told since day one, like, I want my lawyer. I'm like, I'm not talking to him one bit. But other than that, no, I hadn't done anything else. The lawyers that I had on standby, there was nothing was being told to me at the time. So there was really nothing to go on. It was like, I just know I'm under investigation. And they were like, okay, well, we'll just see where this leads. It could go nowhere, or, it could go the way it went. And once they pulled me, they drove me across to 32nd Street, which is another Navy base there, across the bay in Coronado, which is where the NCIS little headquarters is. And they brought me in there and put me in
the major base in San Diego, right?
Yeah. They put me in an interrogation room, just like something you see out of the movies. Had the little see-through glass thing there. And they sat me down, tried to be all buddy with me, like, hey, man, like, we're just, we've heard some things, and you're being, just accused. This was the first time I heard you're being accused of murder. And I knew better than I wasn't even going to start having a conversation with them. I just was, and I was polite to them. I wasn't a dick. I was like, hey, I even said that. I was like, I don't want to be a dick to you guys, but I want my lawyer, like, before I say anything. And they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, can I call him? Can I call him? They had my phone. They were like, yeah, just give us his number and we'll call him. I gave it to them. They both walked out, shut the door, and that was it for 7 hours. No one came back. I think twice somebody knocked and cracked it open to see if I needed a piss. But
7 hours?
7 hours from, well, I say 8:30 in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I can't remember exactly when they let me out.
And they told you were being charged for murder?
They didn't tell me I was being charged with anything. They just said that I had been accused.
Accused of murder?
Of murder.
Did you have any idea what for?
They said it was on the prior deployment, that Mosul deployment. And that's it. That's all they really said to me. And then once I told them I wanted my lawyer, they left.
When they told you that, and they told you it was the last deployment, did you have I mean, it sounds like you guys got a shit ton of trigger time.
Yeah.
Is there any specific
No, and
incident
that was
that
sort of
came to
like the
mind?
scary part of it was, you know, I think you kill enough individuals, you know, unemployment, you can be like, well, this could be any one thing. And not saying that we murdered anybody, but, you know,
Yeah.
you don't know. You don't know what's being said. I had heard enough rumors up to that point. And I heard some, I mean, the teams is like one big sewing circle. So I had guys obviously coming up to me like, oh, these guys were, we heard this. I mean, they heard I was stomping babies out. It was like, it went from like the most craziest rumors to the most like mundane. I mean, that's why, you know, Andrea coined the term. I think it was like from Red Bulls to war crimes. You know, it was everything, that and everything in between. And so I had no real concept of like, or idea what they were actually saying I did, you know, or what scenario that I was supposedly involved in. So once they locked me in that, they kept me in that room. You know, I had no idea what was going on. But while I was in that room, they went and raided my house. They raided my cage, my car, which was at the team. They went to everything. And they sent a, I don't even, 20 to 30 man SWAT team to my house. This is the crazy thing, is when they were taking me over to that interrogation room, I asked them, I was in the back of the car, handcuffed, and I'm like, how long is this going to take? And they were like, why? And I'm like, because my wife's not home. She's at lunch or like a brunch with a friend. And I was like, my oldest son is leaving and I need to be back by, I think it was like 1 o'clock because my youngest son's there. I specifically remember this as those two looked at each other like, and they're like, oh no, yeah, we'll get you out. You'll be done by then. I was like, okay. Well, as I'm being, you know, I'm in that office with no phone, wondering like what my kids are going to do. They were actually raiding my house during that time. My youngest son was downstairs watching TV. My oldest was still in bed.
How old?
He had just turned 18.
And your youngest?
8 years old at the time. The way they both like have described to me what happened is, you know, my youngest was watching TV. We have a big window that looks out into the street in our living room. He looked out the window and saw guys with automatic weapons coming up to the house in like a train, you know. He said he saw a guy in the window, I think, with a gun, which he's 8 years old. He ran upstairs, got my oldest son, woke him up, and was like, there's guys with guns outside. My oldest son told him to get the fuck out of his room, or, you know, was like, whatever, thought he was just being kooky. And he started crying and was like, no, there's guys with guns. I was like, you need to go look. So my oldest son walked downstairs and he said he could see somebody out of the window. And when he opened the door, there was a guy on his knees with a gun to him, pointed at him, and then two guys with other guns pointed at his head.
The 8-year-old?
No, this is my 18-year-old, and my 8-year-old standing behind him, crying. They were yelling at my oldest son to get his hands up, which he did. And then they were like, we need to come outside now. You know, this is all, my oldest son is like, doesn't know what's going on. And he calmly was like, well, can I put my hands down to open the door? And they didn't know what to do. He said they just sat there, like, trying to figure out how to actually conduct a fucking raid. Or
so these guys
no, they were,
this is the first house they ever raided.
Yeah, you know. And the crazy part is these are all NCIS agents. They had an FBI agent somewhere in the mix, because they would not be able to conduct that raid without an adult there present. So that's what they used. Like, they had an FBI guy there, like, being like, oh, I'm overseeing this. But But that goes to show you anything. These guys can't even conduct raids without an adult present, so they don't do anything stupid. They ended up pulling my kids out in the middle of the street in their underwear. By this time, the neighbors, are all looking out, seeing this go on. They have my whole street, every avenue to my street barricaded off. It looked like I was a cartel member.
So they yanked an 8-year-old kid out of your house at gunpoint and threw his ass in the front yard in his underwear for everybody to see.
Yeah, and left him there for a while. And they started to lay siege to my house. Now, my wife is Andrea. She's down the street, probably like 2 miles at a breakfast place having brunch with a friend. She gets a phone call from my daughter, who my daughter was in Ohio at the time with her biological dad. And so one of the neighbors had called my daughter a girl that was our neighbor and was like, your brothers are outside with guns pointed at their heads in their underwear. And there's people all over the streets with guns.
Holy shit.
So my daughter was like, calls my wife, and she's like, I just got a call from so-and-so, and this is what's going on. And, all this is probably like crazy. And they're just like, what? And so my wife gets up, and she's like, I got to go. Races home. And she said that she tried to pull up in our neighborhood. Everything was blocked off. She somehow got a call from one of the NCIS agents, and she was like, I'm coming home. And they opened it up and let her through. She parked, and then they immediately started interrogating my wife. They brought her into a van, I think, and just started asking her all sorts of questions.
And you had no idea this shit was going on?
No idea that any of this was going on. I think it was my youngest son asked one of the NCIS agents why they were there, and they pretty much said your dad's a murderer, or he's being told the kids that I'm being charged with murder. Pretty much telling my kids I'm a murderer, which is insane to me. Why you would tell somebody's kids that when you don't have anything, at that point. And then, my wife pretty much told him to screw off in some form or fashion, and was just like, I have nothing to say to you. And then she went in and watched them pretty much take everything out of my house. Took all my kids' electronic equipment, took anything they could.
Damn.
They found, going through my garage, just like any other team guy's garage, I have all my kit bags and shit in there. So they were pulling out, magazines that are high capacity magazines for California, and pretty much being like, oh, got them on this. I had this is actually pretty funny. I had a dummy grenade, the blue body, in one of my kit bags.
Yeah.
They called EOD and said I had a live grenade in my house. So EOD, I guess, rolls up to my house, and come to find out it's literally a dummy grenade. And they were like, this is, just to give you an idea how incompetent these fucking guys are. The best thing I think I heard my wife say is when they were, they'd been there for hours, and she's just like watching them go through all of our shit and take it. And she told me, she's like, they all look like it was just a bunch of beta male, dudes, just, you could tell, these fucking guys have no idea what they're doing. And one of them came up to her, and I don't know if he put his hand on her shoulder or did something. It was like, this must be really hard for you. What's going on right now? And I guess she told me, she looked at him, and she's like, you have no fucking clue what we go through in this community. She's like, you think this is fucking hard? She's like, you're out of your mind. Get the fuck, hurry, get your shit, get the fuck out,
Yeah.
So they, dispersed. I have no clue that this is going on. They come back in the interrogation room finally, and they're like, hey, all right, you can go. At this point, I'm just fucking worn out just from sitting there for so long wondering what's going on. I come out. They had my phone, and they're like, we're keeping your phone. I was like, all right. And they're like, I said, can I call my lawyer? Or I think it was either my lawyer or my wife. And they're like, oh yeah. They gave me my phone. I put the code in, and then they yanked it out of my hand. And they're like, you can't have it. And that's how they got into my phone. And right before I left the NCIS office, one of the agents, this little turd, Brian Frank, he actually testified at my trial. He's in there all kitted up. It looks like he's like this little kid playing airsoft. He looks right at me and he's like, hey, when I was walking out, he's like, I saw your wife today. And I turned and looked at him like, what? And he's like, yeah, I saw her. And I was like, okay, like, what the fuck are you talking about? I just walked out. Like, little did I know, until I got home, that they had pretty much laid siege to my house.
So they're fucking taunting you.
Yeah. Everything they did was to taunt me and try and get me to do something so they could be like, we got him. I mean, it was... At that point, I had no idea, but it became more evident as this whole nightmare went on. But I got home, and that's when, my wife and kids were in the living room just like, what the fuck? And yeah, that's when we knew. I was like, dude, this has gotten real. Like, what is going on? I went into the command the next day, furious. Demanded to talk to the Group 1 Mass Chief again.
Usually we take phone calls on the show, but this time we happen to have your son and your wife here. And so I'm going to bring them on and we're going to get their firsthand account of the raid. So, Ryan.
Yeah.
Do you remember when the police came to your house?
I did. It was, I forgot what day it was. It was on a weekend. It was like a Saturday. And my dad was gone at work, and my mom was at a photo shoot, and my sister was in Ohio. I was with my brother, and I was watching TV, and I heard a pounding on the door, and someone was like yelling, get out. So I opened the curtain, and there's a ton of people with guns outside.
How many people?
There was about 15 people.
15 people?
And there was like cars blocking the entrance to the, because it was a through street and they were blocking the entrance. Like, it was our house that was blocked. Like, we couldn't get out. And I went upstairs and I was telling my brother, I was crying, that there's people outside with guns. And it was funny because he was like, if it's your friends with Nerf guns, I'm gonna hit you so hard. So he goes outside and we're both in our underwear and there's guys with guns and
how old were you?
I was 8 or 7, and so I walk outside, and there's people, there's a guy camped with a shotgun, by the side, and then there's, 2 other people with rifles, and they're, the lasers are, right on us.
They had their lasers shining on you?
And they were, decked out with armor and stuff, and there's, a guy with a thing, to knock down our door, and, these people made us go in a car, and we waited for 30 minutes, and they were in our house, taking everything, and there's people everywhere.
What did they do when you opened the door, or they opened the door?
My brother did.
And what happened when the door opened?
There was 5, everyone's yelling get out of the house, get out of the house, and yeah.
Were they pointing their guns?
Yes.
At you? Mm-hmm. Where were they pointing? There's
people behind their cars and stuff.
What about the guys in the door?
They were less than a foot away, and the gun was right at my head, so it was really close.
So you're 8 years old, and you had a whole team pointing a gun at your face in your underwear?
Yes.
And they made you go outside in your underwear?
Yeah.
Did they hold a gun on you while you were in the front yard in your underwear?
There was a couple people that were, but most of them went inside to go inspect the house and they were moving all the furniture and they didn't it was dumb.
Were they asking you questions?
No, I think they were asking my brother questions, and then we sat in the car for about 30 minutes, and since my sister was in Ohio, her friend, she was calling her and texting her that there's a SWAT team at my house and we're in a car, and my mom didn't know what was going on. My dad, he was like he was somewhere and he wasn't able to contact us or anything. So
Do you think they knew that your dad wasn't home?
no, they knew.
They did know.
Yeah, they knew that. They like I don't know what was happening, but all I knew was they knew he wasn't home, and they were trying to scare us. And they wanted him to do something. I don't know. But
Did they scare you?
yeah, I was scared.
I'll bet. 8 years old with a gun in your face,
Yeah.
in your underwear. Well, thanks for sharing, Ryan. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for coming on, Andrea. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So we just got your son's account of the NCIS raid, and I just wanted to get kind of where you were, what it felt like, what it was like when you showed up at home to see your 8-year-old son and your 18-year-old son in the front lawn with their underwear on at gunpoint by the NCIS.
Yeah. So it was June 20th, 2018. And unbeknownst to us, our house had been being cased for weeks by NCIS. And we actually had a neighbor that was working in tandem with NCIS. I think he thought he was some type of Matt Damon informant type character from the movie. So he had started to report our movements and report different things, and he had also informed them that we were going to be moving. So NCIS had been watching us, watching our movements, and so that day, I had left the house. Was leaving to go to meetings, and I had work meetings. Eddie had already left to go to work, and it just seemed like a normal day. We left the boys at home. Trevin was still asleep, who was our 18-year-old at the time. Ryan would have been 8, and so he was at home. He was up. He was just like watching cartoons. And I went to my first meeting, and it was actually with a girlfriend. Since we were leaving, we were kind of having one last little get-together. And I was at the table, and my daughter had called me, but my daughter was not home. My daughter was actually in Ohio, and she called me asking where I was. And I was like, I'm with my friend, like, what's going on? And she sounded very worried. And she's like, Mom, she's like, the neighbor girl just called me. There's police everywhere, and the boys are outside of the house, like they're in their underwear. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I just like got up, left the table, jumped in my car, and as I'm driving, I'm trying to like call my neighbor. And it just kept on going to voicemail and voicemail and voicemail. And finally, by the 4th time I think I called, she picked up the phone screaming. And so my next door neighbor is on the phone screaming. And she's like, they've got your kids, they've got your dogs, they're everywhere. And I'm like, who is this? Who is it?
Damn.
And she's like screaming on the phone saying, this is their mother, this is their mother. And I'm hearing someone screaming back at her saying, get off the phone, get back in your house. So I'm in full, like, what is going on? Freaking out.
What did you think? Do you have any idea?
No, I had
It was
no
what
idea.
it was, or?
Well, we lived in Point Loma, which is kind of like Point Loma military housing. We lived at the Village at NTC. So it's kind of like a thoroughfare between like Rosecrans, which is a very busy street, and also Harbor. And we have a lot of homeless. So in my mind, I'm like, is there like a homeless person or a bum like in my, garage or something? Like, what are they doing? I didn't know it was even NCIS. I had no clue. Once I found out what was going on, I got another call from a blocked number, and the woman was like, we are from NCIS. We're at your home. Tell us what kind of car you're driving. They had the streets barricaded. They had people in full militia riot gear. They had people staged and set up like they're going to war. And so when I come through, there's like 7 to 8 black, armored vehicles in front of my home. And there's people just like spurting out everywhere, out of my garage, out of my front door. And my son had only turned 18 2 to 3 weeks prior, which they also knew. And so they took advantage of the fact that Eddie was gone, I was not there, and they gained entry through an 18-year-old that just woke up. So when I got to the home, they actually pulled me into a vehicle and started to question me. But what I found out later was Eddie had already been apprehended. He was at work. They came, they got him, and they threw him in a room for 7 hours. They denied him legal counsel. So there was no Navy SEAL threat there. So you didn't need to lay siege to my house with 2 children in it in that fashion.
Why do you think they showed so much force for an 8-year-old?
To terrorize us and
an
intimidate
18-year-old.
us and to convince people that, we did something wrong. And that's exactly what happened. It worked because you don't go to that level and then people just were like, oh my gosh, you guys had to have done something.
Yeah.
And so it worked. So they had Eddie. He did not know the whole day what was going on. He did not know that our home was being raided. So if you think of the psychological warfare that they started at that moment to entrap him in an office building and then basically did not tell him all day what they were doing, it was just a form of psychological warfare on him because he went to fight, for our country to prevent people from terrorizing, members of the United States. And then they take him and they lock him up on American soil, and then they lay siege to his home and terrorize his wife and his children on his own land. I mean, it's pretty sick, what they did. So that was Eddie's story, what was happening to him while this was happening to us. But what I found out later from the boys was that Ryan was actually sitting kind of in a chair like this watching TV, and looks out the window and sees people with guns and like battering rams lining up at our door. And you can imagine an 8-year-old. He starts freaking out. He runs upstairs. He tells my son, who's in bed, asleep at this point, that there's people with guns at the door. And so my oldest is just like, dude, what are you talking about? He's thinking it's maybe neighborhood kids with Nerf guns or something, and Ryan's being Ryan. But then Ryan starts to break down in tears. And so my son gets up, obviously, and is like, okay. They walk downstairs. My oldest son opens up the door. And so there's a main door and there's a screen door. And they're all screaming at him. They're pointing rifles at my children. And they're saying, put your hands up. And they're also simultaneously saying, open up the door. So if you can imagine the level of Bush League that this operation is. So my son's like, do you want me to put my hands up or do you want me to open the door? And they're like, do you give us permission to enter, put your hands up? And so he basically gets pulled out into the street along with my son in their underwear. And they're just paraded right into the, middle of our housing complex. And then they all just rush in. And that was the start of a 7-hour raid on our home.
I just want to, I'm sorry that you and your family had to go through that. And I just want to tell you, you are a strong, motivated, effective, and just amazing human being. And
Thank you.
I mean, the campaign that you started from scratch and what it turned into, I mean, if it wasn't, for you, then you'd still be in there. So, I mean, what an example you've set, and
Thank you.
hell of a job. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Well,
thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. All right, so you're going to talk to the Master Chief at the command after your house just got raided.
Yep. So I went in, demanded to talk to him. He came over to supply, sat down with me and another Master Chief that was in charge of supply, and I was like, I was pissed. I was like, my house just got raided. My kids were pulled out at gunpoint yesterday. What the hell's going on? Why aren't you guys, like, at this point I was beyond frustrated, because nobody had been talking to me at this point. Now my family was they involved my family and started, they're putting my family to shit, which I have a line that everybody knows.
Yeah.
You can mess with me all you want. Like, I might fight back, I might not, I don't know, but you mess with my family, like, that's it, and that was pretty much well known through everybody that knew me in the community. Like, that's when my family's what mattered to me the most. So I was definitely beyond pissed off. The Group 1 Master Chief, Steve Ward, told me that it's like denied knowing anything about it, which is bullshit. And then he told me that if I had any issues with it, that I should go talk to a chaplain. And that was the only advice he gave. I was like, that's what you have to say to me right now. is that I can go talk to a chaplain about what's going on. He was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, and one more thing. And he slid a piece of paper across the table. I had picked up E8 or got selected for E8. And he was like, you're not going to pick up E8. We're going to hold it off until this whole investigation is over with. And they're like, he had me sign it. And I wish at this point I didn't sign that, but I didn't give a shit at that point. I was like, I don't care. I was like, here.
Yeah.
And that was it. He left. And I think, as you can expect, that raid spread like wildfire through the community.
Oh, yeah.
And of course the dummy grenade they found in my garage got spread until they found 5 hand grenades and blah, blah, blah. Like, it just escalates as the telephone game passes through the teams.
Did you have any friends at this point?
Yeah. I mean, I had my my brothers, my teammates that I was talking to, but it's very hard. What can they do?
Yeah.
They're almost like, dude, this is fucked up. And anybody that I talked to that what I was going through automatically got scared themselves. And they were like, dude, what are they going to do to me? If I, step in and say something. It's, that's how they drive fear into you, especially with raiding your house like that. I mean, what that does is there was no reason they could have easily walked up, knocked on the door, and got the same job done. They did it for that reason, because they want to put shame onto you. And it worked. Our neighbors were like, because we went and asked them afterwards, like, hey, did you happen to videotape any of that? And they're like, we're not, like, they don't come and do that to you unless you did something.
Yeah.
And it worked. And then it also, they do it to drive your family apart too. They hope that, they cause enough stress onto your wife or onto yourself that you guys start going at each other, and then one of you flips on each other, starts, doesn't help out. But, obviously that didn't work with us. But I've seen that happen enough, heard enough stories of that happen enough times when I was in the brig that, I mean, it's all for a purpose of why they do those things. But yeah, at that point, I had talked to my buddies about it, and they were all just like, dude, they had no advice or anything. They were just like, dude, this is fucked up. Just like, we were thinking. But that was pretty much the deciding point for me that I was getting out. I'm like, I'm getting out, I felt at that point betrayed, just sort of just left, hung out to dry. I had a couple of buddies that were Master Chiefs at that point that were told me exact thing. They're like, they are railroading you. Like, this is what's happening. They're just hanging you out to dry.
Why do you think they're...
I think it was to protect what it comes down to is they're protecting the institution, right? The NSW. Anything that's brought out in the public arena or in the media that is bad against NSW, they would rather just dispose of whatever that problem is than actually put up with it and fight back. They're like, because they don't want any stains at all. And that's due to the